everyone, and welcome back to the next episode of StreamTime Sports. My name is Chris Stone. I'm the community lead, joined as always by our CEO, Nick Meacham. Now today, Nick, as we're recording, it's the 4th of July, and I tried to find the most American thing in my wardrobe. It is actually a Ron's Pizza and Pub sponsored softball jersey from when my dad was traveling the country playing competitive softball. I reckon I must have been like maybe 4 or 5 years old when he had this shirt. Sad to say that's now 30 years ago. So the fact that it's still here is pretty impressive. But we're also having a little mini heat wave in London. So it's got lots of holes and proliferations in it. So it's quite breezy to stay cool. So yeah, Nick, I'm doing my best to despite the fact I'm working on the 4th of July, to try to embrace the culture a little bit.
Happy 4th of July. Next time we record one that's around the Australia Day, maybe I'll put on some Australian clothes, which could range from an Aussie Rules football jersey. I think they call it a jersey. Yeah. It's been too long since I've been out of the country, which is busting out the guns and wearing stupidly short shorts, or a rugby shirt or a cricket shirt I can pull out of my closet somewhere along the way.
No vest top?
Yeah, sorry, that's the AFL shirt is the shirt of the guns.
Sleeves,
the vest. Yeah. What do you call a vest top in America?
Tank top.
Tank top. We call them singlet in Australia. I don't know if it's a different name. They have more offensive slang terms, which I won't use to kick off the pod. So
I think we've got something similar. Yeah,
yeah. What was I going to say on that point? I was going to ask you. You said it's quite breathable because obviously baseball is mainly actually a summer sport, right? It's through the months of the summer months. Yeah. Is that normal? Because I didn't realize that they had that, or is that depending on the temperature that they have different types of material they use for the season?
So I remember back when I played, and even back in the old baseball days, like they used to have the old school jerseys where like they were tank tops and you just wore a light shirt underneath.
Oh, really?
So like there are different jersey variations. Even when I was in high school, we had stuff we'd wear in the kind of like March, April, and early spring when it's still cold, and then we had different jerseys which were like this kind of mesh material that kind of like got the holes and proliferations in them for the summer months. So yeah, like if you look at teams, they've got different sets of jerseys. So yeah, I think now Nike's probably got them all uniform, looking exactly the same. But back in the day, the Cincinnati Reds used to have all different kinds of combinations of short sleeve tank top jerseys and others. Yeah.
Any plans for what's a typical day of celebrating 4th of July?
You're going to go to the pool. You're going to have a very large barbecue, and then there's going to be fireworks, and depending on your age, a certain level of alcoholic beverages.
Nice. A pretty standard, I think, New Year's day off celebration in the summer. Up in Ohio, are the days long?
Yeah, like it'll be. You know what? I wouldn't say they're as long as what you're experiencing right now in Scandinavia. I would say London or the UK, I've experienced the days to be a little bit longer than they are in the US, but it's still, fireworks probably aren't going off to like 9:30, 10 o'clock once it starts getting dark enough to really enjoy the big bang.
I'm pretty sure in Australia, fireworks are basically completely illegal all year round. Which is not the case. Europe blew me away when I was celebrating New Year's in somewhere in Central Europe, and I was seeing people fire them off left, right, and centre. I could not get my head around that. But on the length of the day, here the days are so long now. And we just had Midsummer last week or the week before when we're recording this, and you can basically play golf till midnight at night here. So my goal to try and get out. I haven't played around this year. Is try and squeeze around a golf in just so I can play after the kids are asleep and get in a game before by midnight, basically be home. So that's my objective, to make maximum value of the days.
Yeah, well, speaking of fireworks, last thing before we get into real business talk, my brother used to live in Chicago for a couple years, and he used to play the game gunshot or fireworks, and it was basically a 50-50 guess.
Wow, that's a proper 4th of July. That's a proper 4th of July way to celebrate. Gosh, I've not seen anything like that.
It wasn't even 4th of July more often than not. Yeah.
So American.
But actually, speaking of 4th of July, and speaking into a segue, one of the other things that takes place on the 4th of July, you have to watch is you got to tune into ESPN. I think we talked about this maybe last 4th of July, and you got to watch Joey Chestnut in the hot dog eating competition. I believe he was banned last year because some of the work he was doing with Netflix, but we are going to talk about Netflix. So that's the segue, because there is a documentary of Kobayashi and Joey Chestnut and their hot dog eating competition. But that's going to be our segue, Nick, talking about 4th of July, hot dog eating, and then we're going to just slide into Netflix.
What a segue. I do actually remember we did quite a big take on that because I remember watching that live broadcast between Kobayashi and the Jaws, as they call him. And I had mixed emotions off the back of watching, I have to say, but they've come a long way since.
Yeah, I mean, it's a full day promotion now, but like I said, we are going to use that to segue and kind of move into the actual podcast itself. It's been a little bit of time since we've actually talked about some of the news, so this is going to be a jam-packed episode full of a bunch of different things. But one of the places we do want to start is with Netflix. We've talked about Netflix expanding their coverage, getting live sports rights with the NFL. I'm also looking forward to next week. They're re-releasing the second season of Quarterback, which will have my man Joe Burrow in it. But one of the see. Free shout out to Netflix. I believe it's on July 12th, so not far at all now. But one of the things you actually had a post about the other day was around Netflix and particularly its approach to boxing. Obviously, it's had some of the Jake Paul fights on there, but now it's been announced that they're going to have the next Canelo Terrence Crawford fight on Netflix, which is, it's just a new approach, Nick. For so long, boxing has always seemed to be centered around the pay-per-view model, and we've seen Jake Paul do it, but this is different. This is a whole new level of boxing being on Netflix, and just there's different ways to look at this from the tech perspective to the monetization side, and you had a LinkedIn post. Go search it. If you type in boxing Netflix Nick Meacham on Google, it'll pop up. You can see the post. But what do you take from this in terms of just the challenge to the established system?
Well, I just think anything that Netflix does now, because of the scale they have, is just instantly in a place where it could disrupt the entire ecosystem. And I think this is one of those examples, right? The fact that they're not adding that pay-per-view layer here, you're going from fights that are being watched by such a niche group of audiences because it's either people who are willing to pay $100 for a fight night. You have to be committed to that. And now we're just saying, actually, for anyone who's a subscriber, you can watch this for free. And we know that what we've seen is a trend over the last couple of years, really, in terms of sports consumption. It is all about personalities and the athletes and those brands and audiences they already have. And boxing's as synonymous with that as anyone else because of the one-on-one, I guess the raw nature of boxing basically being quite primal in a sense. It's man against man or woman against woman, and best one who walks out of the ring wins kind of thing. And that type of content is basic in its format, is actually quite low to produce and broadcast. But we saw what happens when it's marketed well. It can get insane audiences through the Paul and Tyson fight that happened last year at some stage. So this is huge. This is really one of those things that I think does have the ability to completely disrupt the ecosystem because of the fact you are moving away from basically the only core monetization approach, which was pay-per-view, and just making it available for all the masses. And I think it'll just keep growing and going up and up in terms of audience once more people become aware of this type of content. The question mark I have is when you have that balance between the athletes, the real fighters that maybe don't have the stardom, the marketability like a Paul and Tyson fight, and are just good athletes that maybe are a bit behind the scenes, that aren't just as familiar for those that aren't passionate boxing fans. Will they generate the audiences they deserve? Because if they don't, the risk for me is that the money will still going to those people that are built around entertainment, the entertainment factor, and not the best stars in the sport. And that is the risky outcome here. But overall, it's got a huge opportunity to disrupt because of the sheer mass of audiences this can bring to the boxing stage, which has been reducing in size for some time.
Now, I've not seen the numbers from the Paul Tyson fight on this specific angle that I'm going to go down, but in our last episode, go check it out, we talked about piracy, and we sort of, not to put words in your mouth or our guest's mouth, but like the idea that the pirates are always going to be a step ahead technologically. You're not going to be able to beat them in that game. The way to try to combat this is to make sports distributed in a manner with which it is viewed as accessible, but also valuable. The amount of people that have a Netflix subscription is just enormous. So do you think, could this validate, potentially, depending on what the numbers come back and say, that actually the best way to combat piracy is to go this way? So like I said, I kind of wish I'd gone back and looked up some Paul Tyson numbers to see if they had any estimates about how many streams have been pirated, but this sort of approach.
Oh, well, I think 100%. I think that's where this takes us to. And I think anything Netflix does, and Netflix is, because of the sheer scale of audience, has the equivalent impact of being free to air in its broadcast in terms of the impact of audience. So 100% has the impact of taking that edge off of piracy that makes it not as financially lucrative for the pirates to go after these sort of premium instances where no doubt they have. I remember hearing some numbers off the record from a few major broadcasters, and the numbers basically are that the majority of people that are watching the sport are watching it through pirated means. They are not watching it through the conventional and official and legal channels. And so this is the only way, we were talking about this last week. It's the only way you can really find or see light at the end of the tunnel of breaking that cycle of more and more people going to piracy to consume content because of that value exchange that we've been talking about. So I think it does have the opportunity to bring down those barriers to the point where piracy is not going to be able to monetize that in the same way. And that means that their resources will be shifted perhaps elsewhere. So it would be a good win for the sport. The question really comes back to, can boxing generate enough income from this model? Like Netflix can definitely play the trigger or play the card here of, we're going to give you insane reach. We don't want to pay you those premium rights fees that you've been getting from people who are willing to pay you for that privilege of having pay-per-view because it drives so much income and revenue. That's why ESPN's been doing it with UFC, and Sky and Matchroom and DAZN have been doing this. They have been driving great income from it, even if the model is not optimized. Will they still attract those revenues in other means? And I think they can, but it will be trickier if you're at the lower mid-tier to justify getting to Netflix, hey, Netflix, pay us a media rights check before a mid-tier boxing team. So you'll have to monetize through sponsorships and partnerships for that visibility, akin to what we talked about a little bit with the Club World Cup a few weeks ago, and how Auckland City pop up with Michelob Ultra or whatever on their shirt. There's no way that's targeting their audience. They were opportunistic at leveraging the scale and breadth of audience they're going to be reaching. And that's the type of approach I think that most of these sports will have to play if this is the direction they're going to go.
Well, that's the sponsorship side, and we've talked about that, I think, in another previous podcast. We've had multiple times talking about the role of sponsorship, particularly with these live events and how they can thrive off of creating events and sponsorship. But the other side of this will be around advertising. And another story that came up, it was in a newsletter that you forwarded on to me, is that Netflix and Yahoo are now partnering, essentially Netflix allowing Yahoo to go in and have advertisers pay for programmatic ads directly on Netflix. So this is, I think, substantial in terms of the partnership and the, I guess, accessibility for advertisers to get on Netflix. It's also interesting because at the same time, there seems to be a similar partnership that's taken place between Disney and Amazon. So it seems like this ad tech space is being taken a lot more serious when we start talking about Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon, and then Yahoo just being the company that they are. So Nick, just on that side of things with the programmatic ad buying and the partnership with Yahoo, how that helps enable those payments beyond just pay-per-view.
Well, there's another interesting example of this, and that is Sky partnering with, I think it's Channel 4 and Channel 5, I believe, or maybe ITV in the UK. Another example where they're coming together to try and basically build out their own programmatic network. And the net result of that is, hopefully for their benefit, is to increase the CPMs on those ad deals and ad buying, so drive more of a premium. Because remember, we've talked about before that massive gap between programmatic and selling direct on the sponsorship side, and they're selling around live sporting events. They are trying to bridge that gap a little bit, take a bit more control back, because most of the ad buying is done through most of the major big tech companies who've been controlling that flow of income for some time. So they're trying to take a bit more control back. And if they do that and it works, the main way you can achieve that is you need scale. You need scale of ad buying to make it worthwhile for a major ad buyer. And you've been from that background, Chris, so you know what it's like. If you want to be someone who's on that spreadsheet, that budget, you need to be able to provide enough inventory to be worthwhile being part of the conversation with a major brand, right? And that's why these companies have to come together to partner so they can build out the scope of their reach and build out more value so they could be added to the big media budgets that clearly exist and are still growing from strength to strength from what we see on a global scale.
And that's not even the last of Netflix doing things that are new, unique, and all of that. We've also seen in France, and we're going to talk a little bit about France today because of what's going on in Ligue 1 and their continued things. But more specifically talking about France and Netflix, is there's now going to be it's described as a first of its kind carriage deal with TF1, the linear channels, to now have content featured directly on Netflix for users in France. So, anytime you hear first of its kind, it's always exciting and flashy. And Nick, do you think, what is the significance of this? And then not only beyond that, what does that potentially mean in other marketplaces beyond France?
Right. So I think this is pretty significant. I think it's about as significant a partnership between a platform and particularly a public broadcaster as I can think of. And the main reason for that is, again, Netflix is basically a distribution platform with as big a reach as you could possibly imagine. It immediately enhances TF1's reach across the French market with loads of live sports and loads of other content available, but it also pushes them down that linear and live aspect from all the linear programming they're going to bring to the table. What we don't know yet is how they're going to present that. Will they basically add another channel with more and more live content progressively being added to the mix, or will it, I don't know, be just pop up in the on-demand user interface that you're going to have access to? That bit is unclear, as I've always had with any live sports product coming to Netflix, is what sort of visibility are they going to give it for a user coming onto the platform? But the fact is, this gives them loads of content, gives them a live proposition to add to the mix of all the on-demand stuff that they've got available. That why would you log in anywhere else? It just gives you another reason just to go to Netflix when you go on to turn your TVs on, your smart TVs on. So I think every major public broadcaster, when I say public, I also mean just free-to-air broadcaster, but even paid TV providers and a lot will be looking to this deal and going, is this seriously something we can do? Because we've seen a whole inertia in the industry about distribution now is everything. We need to be in more places. We need to be visible. And this instantly unlocks a whole expanded set of audiences to anyone who can partner with the likes of Netflix, particularly in mature markets, but indeed globally. So I just think you'll have everyone now I can think of, like, think about in the UK and BBC, and you think in the US, all those major free-to-air broadcasters say, can we be added to the Netflix interface and be part of that user experience? It's a huge win for Netflix, and it's a huge win for those broadcasters to instantly increase the number of eyeballs and visibility they have. And because they're being built on selling and building their business models on reach and mass audience and advertising, that can only help them drive more revenue depending on the relationship and agreement in place with Netflix. So I think it is a huge momentum shift, which might sound a bit hyperbolic to some, but I really do believe that. I think if they're doing it in France, I mean, France has been serving up some amazing stories in the last couple of years in sports and streaming media, I have to say, but they wouldn't just do this one move and just sit on this. Like, this is, it has to be something that expands not only in France to be talking to all those other major distributors out there and other platforms, but completely around the globe. And would it make sure Netflix the only place to go to watch your content, not just one of a few?
Do you find this akin strategically from a Netflix perspective? We had some of these similar conversations about Sky in the UK, where they had partnerships with TNT and they were doing some other stuff with YouTube, where the idea was they don't really care if you end up going outside of their network, so long as the journey begins in Sky's, home landscape, ecosystem, however you want to call it. Is that a similar strategy where it's okay if it's not our content, so long as your journey goes via Netflix?
I think that's what it definitely feels like. I think they want to own the entire relationship with the audience, with the customer. And by doing so, we'll continue to do that, continue to monopolize that relationship, whereas free-to-air is going to struggle to basically have visibility through traditional linear as its consumption is being reduced market by market. So yeah, owning more of that relationship, as long as they're finding the right economic model that everyone's kind of happy with to move forward with, and they instantly have the scale there that no one else does, it's a huge win for them to continue to own that relationship, and will mean people are knocking on their door to be on the platform, not the other way around.
Well, we're going to stay in France, although this is a story that could potentially be something that is a model that's followed elsewhere, because I have seen some people on LinkedIn speak really positively and optimistic about what it could mean. We've been following the story about what's happening with Ligue in France and the end of their deal after 1 year with DAZN, and now they're looking to take ownership of production, and now they're looking for broadcast partners, but they're still going to, own that channel as far as I'm concerned. They went back to their old partners in Canal Plus, and it now appears as though Canal Plus is going to step away from the right, the ability, however you want to phrase it, to stream that new broadcasted produced channel from Ligue. So now that leaves them essentially in a very similar spot to last year, where we're at the beginning of July, next season's going to start in August, and there doesn't appear to be a home for where this new channel is going to be. I know there's a lot of people excited about it because there's the idea that with the Premier League stepping away from IMG, are they going to start producing their own stuff kind of the way NFL media is done? And there's this idea of how exciting this approach could be, but they still need someone to actually help with the distribution side. So this story keeps evolving, Nick. We've been following it, seems like forever now. But now with the next chapter, Nick, what do you take from sort of where they're at, where it leaves them with, kind of given the time constraints?
I'm not sure I'm really excited to see it happen because I think it's a great litmus test and a great example of what can and can't happen in this space. But I think it's a disaster for LFP and it's not looking any better. The fact that Canal Plus has already actively said we're not going to play ball. I kind of felt like this, and I don't know much. There's some great commentators particularly on LinkedIn around this. Thierry Fortier, Sebastien Oudot, people I follow also on this who have French connections and the French and are closer to it than I am. But I have been following it and also have read a few French articles. And the crux of it is that the economics are getting worse and worse on various metrics. The cost is going down for users, and yet they're still not able to attract the audiences to make this a viable approach for them and make it sustainable for the future. And with Canal Plus stepping away, largely the most reputable, from what I understand, the most reputable sports service, I suppose you would call it, in France, this is a huge challenge because they aren't really looking for broadcasters. I think you said broadcasters. I would say it's just a distribution channel, right? They want to have a place to be visible and available, and there'll be some sort of agreement, whether it's a minimum guarantee, whether it's a revenue share component is part of that, and try and reach as many people and drive as many subscriptions as possible. Now, the price point that they wanted to sell this at, I believe, was around 15 euros. Now, if you remember correctly, I think DAZN, if I remember appropriately, was about double that, 30 or 40 euros. Now, the CEO of the LFP Media, who's taken over, I believe, from Ben Morel, is aiming for at least 1 million subscribers in their first year. So if you can do some math on that, but that is not nowhere near the revenue generation that has been forthcoming in previous cycles, or even indeed making it viable for any broadcaster to consider paying the premiums that they historically generated before. Now, Thierry Fortier was someone who posted something about this, and for context, the actual cost to watch all the LFP, the Ligue 1 matches, peaked at around 89 euros a month, around 2008 to 2012, which is extortionately high, right? But that's what it was at. And now you're looking at basically 15 euros a month. You should be able to get access to all the games. Like, what a dramatic turn of events for them. So I don't know how they overcome this. The million number sounds like a nice number to aim for. Is it achievable? I think we have all seen the sports industry constantly neglect the fact that marketing is really difficult to do, and it can't just be around price alone. I think the price point is trying to address piracy because piracy is so prevalent in that market. But they still need all the distribution partners available to them because otherwise I just don't know how this is a long-term viable commitment. Now, it could be for 1 year, and it could be that this is the what would you call the case study for us to be able to go to market next year and then sell it. But it does not sound like I can't see a road to success unless they're willing to play the long game. And I can't believe that all the investors that exist around Ligue 1 are willing to take 3 to 5 years to hopefully turn the tide on all that massive media rights gap that is clearly there now.
So you're saying it's not going to be like one of my favorite podcasts we've ever done. Go search it up. It was something about David versus Goliath, I think might have been the title,
Sure.
Where we were talking to PAOK FC in Greece, where they talked about they didn't get the broadcast deal that they wanted. So they said, fine, screw it. We'll build our own D2C. And actually, I think it ended up getting double what they were offered the year before because they were so successful. So you're not You don't think it's going to be that situation?
I would love it. I would love it to be the case. I would absolutely love it because it would make the idea of a sports property, a premium sports property, doing it alone, a viable, truly viable option, which would give so much. The net result of that would give so many more rights owners the ability to play that trump card of we're going to do it ourselves. And it's if you want these rights, sports broadcaster, pay the check. But they've been hit, they've been punched, left hook, right hook, uppercut the whole way through this journey of the last 10 years or 7-8 years, whatever the timeline is. I just don't see the light at the end of the tunnel just yet taking this approach. But what I could see is solving this is they take this approach and then someone else does come to the table and helps them get the expanded reach they need. I'm just not sure who it is. Netflix could be one of them.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'll just shamelessly plug that podcast I mentioned. If you're interested in a good story, if you're interested in a good story of an underdog having to be really resourceful and innovative, of how to launch a D2C platform, basically to get back at the broadcasters and double the money they made. It's a really great story. I do believe it's called like David versus Goliath. It's PAOK, which is PAOK. I'm sure if you Google it, it'll come up. Great podcast. If I do say so myself, Nick.
Yeah, no, it's one of the great stories, one of the great success stories, and actually flew very much under the radar because it's a smaller tier organization. But the whole journey there and the numbers really paint a picture of what can be done if you do challenge the status quo sometimes.
Yeah. Now, speaking of numbers, Nick, we're going to go on the complete other side. We're going to talk about some of the biggest numbers you've ever seen. In honor of July 4th and not getting too political, Donald Trump, the numbers are huge with a Y, not with an H. You had a post on LinkedIn about the IPL final, and then there were some numbers about the England and India test match setting records. I mean, Nick, some of the numbers are honestly just staggering when you just start looking at the numbers. And I get it may be limited to certain regions that actually follow cricket. But again, I would suggest go to Google, type in IPL, type in Nick Meacham, and it'll come up with the post right away. And you put down a bunch of facts and figures about it. But some of the numbers about the IPL final that just came up a couple weeks back genuinely are the type of thing, if you're not paying attention to cricket, you really should be at least understanding the scale of what they're being able to do right now.
Oh, but completely. Like, I think it's lost on people sometimes that we have to keep reminding people that, hey, go check out the Indian market. They're delivering high quality product at scale that belittles every other challenge of every other broadcaster who can't deliver scale. They're like, well, we're smashing this in a market that actually it's a developing country. It has not got the scale of infrastructure that some of the other countries have, and yet they just continue to deliver event after event. And the scale is something to behold. And cricket obviously is the number one passion and sport. And I think is India's population number one now in terms of scale. So it is just built to deliver massive numbers when you have the right type of sporting event. I haven't got the numbers in front of me. But I think there was something like 670 odd million views of the final, which I think is just an incredible. Like, let's put 678 total streams were of the IPL final, and a 578 million in the first innings. Like, what? What sort of numbers are they? They're just ridiculous numbers. And then you couple that with 169 million unique viewers through linear. Now, granted, there's obviously some crossover there of audience. They just blow everyone away in terms of the scale that you are talking about in terms of audience consumption. And you think about we talk about advertising a lot, like that is still in its infancy. It's still in a growing marketplace within the Indian economy because of you've got this mass scale, but can you drive the cost, the CPMs that you can in Western markets? Clearly you cannot, but they are driving a premium. The valuations in India for teams and the IPL itself are insane, and that market just keeps going from strength to strength. I just don't know how they do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's truly incredible. And I think just when we talk about like just the scale to be able to deliver those sorts of things, like it probably isn't talked enough just in terms of the feat that's required to do. We talk about like, oh, can Netflix, live stream some games on Christmas, and like, or they, Nick, maybe like 25 million, I think was roughly the number of people that watch the NFL games. So like, You're talking about just, quadruple, quintuple. I don't know how those words continue to multiply, but like you're talking in a completely different stratosphere. We were concerned about Netflix, and you got people like Geo that are just doing it all the time, like it's no problem.
Yeah, it's completely mad. Now, the tricky bit with when you look at data is you do need to go away from, you've got to try and dissect it a little bit further, right? Because it can be misleading. I think every now major social platform uses 1 second as a view time for content, which therefore makes it tricky to digest. But based on some of the estimates of some of those numbers I just shared, you're still talking about the actual true reach of that game to be around 400 million people. 400 million people tuning in to watch an event, 50 to 60 million concurrent viewers of peak concurrency on streaming alone. Those numbers are pretty baffling. And we have covered that from the business side a few times, also on this podcast as some examples of that. But I think I need to do some nerding out and understand how they're actually able to do that from the tech side, because it is truly an incredible feat. So fair play to them. I think the main thing that people need to understand about that Indian market that I think is just interesting to consider is most of that is revenue generation to fund this is done through advertising partnerships that, again, is not hidden behind paywalls. And that model has been, the approach has been one that has existed in India for some time, and it continues to deliver results in terms of value creation for the IPL. So they found a way to make it work and bypassed a lot of, say, steps and challenges that, say, the Western market has had.
All right, Nick, sounds like I need to do some recruitment, get someone from Geo to come in and talk to us about everything that they're doing on some of those crazy streaming numbers. Yeah. Well, actually, that'll mean our good friend William Tubbs will get a message from me.
Good stuff.
For those that don't know, William Tubbs is our head of programming, so he does all of the agenda content. So if you've been to one of our events, which is probably likely if you're a listener, Will's the one that leads all that content that he puts together. So yeah, he'll get a little message from me. There's your shout out with Tubbsy. So moving back over to Europe, and we're going to focus the next two stories around Germany. Again, a story that we've followed a little bit. We haven't mentioned in a while, but we have known that Comcast has been looking to potentially sell certain parts of the business, particularly from the Sky side within Europe. And it looks like RTL, who's the domestic, one of the domestic broadcasters in Germany, is now going to acquire Sky Deutschland, which includes Sky Sports Germany. That's reported to be around 150 million euros. So we have seen the writing on the wall for a little bit of time, Nick, that Comcast was trying to offload some of this. But, what do you make of it, beyond the being perhaps a little bit inevitable, what it maybe means for just the marketplace? Because we've seen a few of these mergers, acquisitions taking place seemingly quite a bit over the last 12 months.
Yeah, we have seen. I do expect to see more of them. What took me by surprise was a couple of things, but one, it really is that just the price, the value. You think about the value of the rights they're actually sitting on, that Sky Deutschland, just from the sporting perspective, and they're worth hundreds of millions through the cycle, and they only sold for 150 million euros total. Now, granted, there is upside, but that's all dependent on RTL's share price. So if the share price, like that, is completely protecting RTL's basically future, they're not committed to this massive check down the line if things don't go to plan and then the market doesn't see what they've done as value additive. So I would have thought going into this that Sky Deutschland's position was pretty solid. The business was pretty solid. This could sell for coming close to billion plus was kind of what I was expecting the number to be. Wouldn't have surprised me. Now, there's no doubt experts who are closer to the action who will tell me all the reasons why it's not. One of the things I did hear was that the subscriber acquisition costs for Sky Deutschland were actually insanely high. So they were taking something like 2 years worth of subscription value to secure a subscriber. I can't remember where I read that. I read that on LinkedIn from one of the experts in the space. So apologies for that. I'll try and give him a shout out if I can when I post something about this. But the point is, okay, subscriptions are really hard to sell. That's one of the drivers of this challenge and basically the low price point that Sky Deutschland has sold. Like, can you think about the possibility of Sky in the UK, given its dominance, its market share? Now, it's a different business and different scale, but to even be in that stratosphere of price is beyond shocking to me. So that's one thing. The other bit is just now that RTL becomes a home for a huge amount of content. They already had things like the Premier League, I think Europa League, and a few other things from a football perspective. Now they get F1, they get Bundesliga, they get the NFL. They basically get just more market share and dominance that this, depending on how they package all this up, makes them the destination you must subscribe to. I'm sure wouldn't make some of the other competitor platforms like DAZN in that market particularly happy about seeing them come together, because it means that there's even more competition for if you're going to subscribe to one or multiple subscriptions, you're going to go to these guys. You're not going to go to someone smaller perhaps. So a bit of a challenging market for those also playing in that space, but a huge move by RTL, and at that price, who can blame them?
Yeah, I remember speaking to someone, and I think Germany was like the last European market to legalize the ability to have pay TV. So I think for the longest time, everything was free to air. So I think to your point, when you think about the UK having subscription to Sky Sports, like I could never imagine Sky Sports just selling this, making a deal with the BBC, ITV, Channel 4, whoever it may be. But I do remember someone saying like Germany was one of the last countries to domestically legalize it. So they've always been on the lower end of, I guess, affinity to pay for content. It's always been a struggle in the market. So that probably does explain the lower costs. And then I'm trying to remember which story it was we were talking about, Nick. Who was it that paid someone to give away their rights? And the idea behind it is that they're going to now have to take on the payments for those rights. So they're paying someone to take it from them, but that person is also going to have to use that money to pay the rights holder. Who was that story?
Yeah, that was IMG Arena paid Sport Radar for the betting on the betting rights side. Yeah, so I think that's definitely a factor here. And obviously, there's some pretty impressive finance experts, and obviously we have an investment event that's happening as with this podcast will be coming out to market, I believe, happening where I'm hopefully getting a bit more insight on how these things are valued. But yeah, those economics clearly play a pretty major role in how things are managed. I mean, the other massive X factor here is naturally, I think they started to share some numbers online about where the cost savings, the optimizations will have basically, so it'll drive up the profitability of these two bodies coming together. That typically means there'll be a lot of cost savings made, likely with people and personnel as well. So I would expect to see quite a bit of a shift with people, and some massive changes on the workforce front for these two organizations. And obviously, it naturally will be interesting for the industry to see how they come together. Will they all just wrap under the RTL brand? Will they just run them as different products? Sky staying as the pay TV proposition, RTL as the free-to-air access product, or will they just merge under one big super brand? The time will tell, but it is a hugely disruptive move for the German market, it has to be said.
Well, staying in the German market and staying particularly around the investment side, again, another story we've been following, a good friend of ours, and I think most people in the industry will know him, our friend Andreas Hayden. Apparently, when you saw him in Sweden, mentioned there might be some stuff they're cooking up, and it does appear as though that news has now been put out publicly, and that's Dine has, expanded its shareholder base. It's now valued at 80 million euros, and some of the people that are coming on board are very interesting given who they've said they are targeting and what they're not targeting. It's a little interesting who's now an investor in that space, but it does seem as though what Andreas and team have been able to do with Christian Seifert, who, used to be the CEO of the Bundesliga as well. It's interesting, Nick. It seems like two really smart guys are seeming to continue to do really smart things.
Yeah, you've got to love how this has come almost full circle back to DFL in this instance. And it raised loads of questions about what the future looks like, right? Like Dine is now at the precipice. They really went focused on their proposition. I think they picked 5 sports from the beginning. We're going to double down, super serve these people that are underserved. And we're going to build everything around this group of people and build a sustainable business out of this. Now, the devil is in the detail. And I think what Andreas has done with his technological background has really focused on keeping costs down, using the cloud, using AI, using efficiency in their broadcast production to make the value of the broadcast so much more valuable to them. Really made sure they work with partners that understand the relationship, making sure that money is feeding through grassroots to grow the sport, making sure those rights owners are pushing awareness and visibility of this subscription offering and positioning it as a positive for them. It's not, we're asking money from you now, we're giving you a better service. And that has obviously resulted in various measures of success, leading to this huge set of investment they've received. So the questions now for us is, what is the future for this? They've received more funding. We had obviously Flow Sports on recently, valued at 100 million. This is basically a sim evaluation for the Dime business based on what we depending on what reports you follow, is what is next for them. They've proven a case that they can build a subscription-led model, not subscription only. I think advertising still makes up, I'm not sure what's been reported, but a portion of a meaningful portion, it's not the majority. Its majority is definitely subscription. Where do they go from here? Now, DFL coming on board raises all sorts of flags. They're like, all right, does that mean now with what's happening with RTL and Sky Deutschland, does that mean that now Dine's potentially going to be a viable player for them? In Germany, firstly, given they're in the market. Now, that would be a surprise because of the premium relationships they have with broadcasters, but it does raise the question. The next question it raises is, where do they go from here from a market perspective? Do they keep doubling down and focusing on the German market alone, or the DAC region, I think they are across, or do they keep growing further and further afield into different markets? Do they use the same brand? Do they basically try and build a DAZN-like global streaming service? Now, they would need a lot more money under their sort of in their rights war chest to take that approach. But if they are doing deals that are super serving underserved sports properties and underserved sports fans, then it won't cost as much as you would think to start going after a couple of other markets that maybe are set up for that sort of opportunity. So I think if they found the model, they believe the thesis is solid, that they can run these events cheaper than most and still deliver really high quality product. They can target those fans more effectively than most. We've spoken to Andreas a number of times. He's been at our events and so forth. He's clearly a shrewd operator. He balances beautifully that business understanding and the technical side as well as anyone. He's the ideal person for this type of opportunity. It's just a matter of what they want to prioritize first. And some pretty interesting investors behind them with DFL and then the owners of Lidl behind them to enable this, right? So I'm really excited to follow what their next steps are and how bold they'll be from here.
Yeah, and to your point, I remember Andreas when he was first talking about this, they were very explicit. I forget what the number was. I feel like it was somewhere between like 30 and 40%, where they were like 30 to 40% of sports fans in Germany are not fans of football. And we explicitly want to go and target that community of people. And I feel like the statement is we're not football. We're not going to do football. But when you think about Christian, you think about Andreas, you can't help but make that connection. So to your point, like the fact that the DFL is now an investor, given what those two are doing, I don't know if football's the next step, because as you say, some of those rights are going to be already so wrapped up. They're also going to be so expensive. But like, yeah, it does. The whole expression where there's smoke, there's fire. Like it just feels like there's something. But you know, maybe we're completely wrong. Who knows?
But I think their secret sauce here is like they're not the first company or organization to come in like, oh, we're going to target lower tier sports and try and do this. But they have just taken a subtly different approach, and they focus heavily on execution. So efficiency, a bit classic German, I guess, trademark of like being hyper focused on excellence in efficiency of delivery. And that has stood them out from perhaps where you might see, I don't know, I don't want to generalize too much, but maybe a big US company goes, oh, we'll disrupt Europe and go big, but not think about the minor details. And they've been focused on the remote production side of things. They did a great presentation. Andreas did a great presentation at the Streaming Tech Sweden event that went into the detail of that. I don't want to promise anything, but I'm sure we'll get him down to Madrid in some capacity out of our media summit this year. And I think they've just proven out that if you're smart about your approach from tech as well as strategy, then you can really find a model that works.
The last story of the day is around the Premier League and its new deal with Microsoft. I think in the article that was written by our technology editor, Steve McCaskill, I think he writes that the Premier League is so big, it's afforded the opportunity to be a late mover at times. It doesn't always have to be taking risks that it doesn't have to. But this deal with Microsoft is a significant deal, just given the scale of the business. Also, the fact that we know the last couple of years, Alexandra Willis has come in with the idea of building out their digital, network, digital ecosystem. And this is going to be coming with a brand new app that's just been rolled out, brand new website. I think they've described it as all these new digital ecosystems. What do you think, Nick, when you include the fact that they're moving on from IMG? They've got this new deal with Microsoft, not saying those two things are connected, but they're probably not entirely exclusive. But just these continued steps by the Premier League in terms of seeming to take a more sophisticated approach to their digital strategy that we maybe have felt that they've been behind maybe someone like the NFL or the NBA on in recent years?
Well, it's interesting you put it as they've been afforded, or Steve put it as haven't read the full article. I've got it on my tabs to read, but because it's quite a piece of work by Steve there to explain all the detail. But whenever you see an announcement like this, and you see, I'd say here's my skeptic side, is that you see Richard Masters doing the big sell on working with Microsoft and Copilot. This is a heavily laden commercial. There's a heavily laden commercial aspect of this deal. Microsoft obviously did the app efforts with the NBA. And so I'm guessing they probably followed a similar playbook and approach. Haven't spent much time on the platform, but I have seen two people on my social feeds basically saying that the platform wasn't working for them at the time. So some skepticism, some negativity to begin with, but they are delivering something at a huge scale. So inevitably, you can give them the benefit of the doubt that they'll sort it out and be in a better place after the fact. But it's clearly a commercial relationship with Microsoft. They're with the NBA, they're with the NFL. They're not just signing up with Microsoft purely because they want to integrate Copilot into their app platform. So, and they can afford the last mover, or they are last movers for a couple of reasons. One, my view is that they can't ever get it wrong. That's the thing. It's like that Man United, Man City example I've shared before. Is they're on such a pedestal that they make one mistake and everyone rips them apart. A bit like the example I've said of people on my feed jumping into it to say that they've had issues on the platform, versus more disruptors. They can basically get up and running earlier and make some errors along the way and ultimately sort it out as they go along. So I don't know what to expect. I don't know if this is the finished product, whether this is just the starting point for them. But it's another great opportunity for Microsoft to get in front of huge audiences and keep their connectivity and give them another channel to market one of their other assets. Previously, I remember with the NFL, it was originally around their Microsoft Surface was a big part of the activation you saw come to life. With the NBA, it was just, I can't remember exactly what they were. It was a marketing platform for them. Now with this, I love to see where it goes and if they can really innovate, have a truly innovative platform. So I'm positive they'll work it out if they have some challenges at the moment. I think that's inevitable with these organizations. They work it out quickly. But I always am skeptical when I see a big tech company partnered in this environment. I don't think you need to, if you're the Premier League, need to work with a big tech company to create the best experience possible for a fan. Instead, you're doing it because there's a commercial reason. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just think everyone needs to understand that that's why we're here.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the interesting things, I've heard this from a couple of different people. One of the challenges, this was actually no big secrets, I'm not naming names or anything. We held a CTO forum at our Sports Pro AI event, which again is going to be running September 23rd, 24th in London again. One of the things that came up in the CTO forum talking about the struggles that sit between the CTO and, say, the chief commercial officer is the chief commercial officer is trying to get the biggest partnership available. The CTO is trying to build the best platform available. And oftentimes the CTO is basically got his hands tied behind his back because that's the best commercial deal that comes in. And they say inevitably, if you build this new platform with said partner, what happens in 5 years when they don't want to renew? Well, either A, you have to completely rebuild the platform again with a new tech partner, or you hire a new tech partner and you still have to pay the old tech partner for the platform they built for you. So you're kind of screwed either way. So I do find some of these things a little bit interesting where Definitely. We talk about sort of synergies within business where the CTO and the chief tech or chief partner officer, chief commercial, whatever, they don't always see eye to eye. And where those two things line up is actually probably trickier than most people realize.
It's a really great point. I think it is one of the biggest growth areas in the sports industry is this ability to partner with technology and then activate that by making their technology part of their product. And what you will normally hear on the negative side is companies that are startups, a little bit more developed, but also even the big ones saying, and these are B2B organizations, right? They're not selling globally, and a big tech like the scale of a Microsoft is like, we're getting told we have to pay huge checks to some of these rights owners to for us to provide their services? How are we supposed to run a business if we have to pay them when we think they should be paying us for what we're giving to them? And it becomes that tricky conundrum. And that's why you do see these types of announcements, these types of platforms are partnered with these big tech organizations. And in fact, F1, through different, particularly on the team side, is by far the leader in these tech-style partnerships, because they are able to bring those things to life. They're able to create these stories where the tech company can then go, hey, we did this for this tech company and they work in thousands of a second. We can do it for you. And that storytelling is actually a really powerful sales tool for any of these types of organizations going to market either at a consumer level or even on a B2B level in some instances. So I'm definitely not knocking these types of partnerships. That the industry's needed them, and it's been a huge growth area. And one of the reasons sponsorship revenue has been growing is because of this relationship. It just makes it tricky, to your point, how the organization itself sets itself up so it doesn't get basically screwed at the other end, having to deal with the aftermath if the relationship or agreement, sponsorship deal, whatever you want to call it, goes awry. And that's tricky.
It absolutely is. Well, Nick, that has been an absolutely jam-packed episode with all kinds of different news stories. You know, we've kind of thrown it out there. If you're a French expert, please let us know on LinkedIn what we got wrong. If you're a German expert, let us know what we got wrong. If you know stuff about India, we're trying to learn more about it. But really great episode, Nick. Lots of good stuff in there for everybody. And, for those that are American, I hope looking back at this, you had a lovely 4th of July. Just another good time to be with you, Nick.
And absolutely. And obviously, as this recording comes out, we're going to be in London together. We'll be hosting our first StreamTime Connect event exclusive for our membership base, which I think is worth giving a shout out. So really excited. We're going to have a full house for that event, and which will be happening in London at Snap's headquarters, which is a great space for us to host that. So looking forward to getting back together in person, Chris, for that one. And if you're interested in the StreamTime membership, then get in touch with us and we can give you some more information. But otherwise, I'll see you in person next week. And thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Now, before you go, if you liked what you heard today, be sure to rate and review and just let me know what you think on social. You can find me on most social platforms as SportsPro Nick. And please do spread the word of the podcast. There's no better way of marketing than word of mouth, whether that be in person or on social media. And if you don't like what you've heard, or you think we should be doing more or less of something, then reach out and let me know, as I'd love to hear from you. Thanks, StreamTimers. Until next time.